Hello everybody. First off, let me apologise to those of you who've been suckered in by the beautiful Tarocco orange 650 Spider that I've decided to use as the thumbnail for today's video. As you can probably tell already, this video is not about or featuring that car specifically, but I am going to be talking about McLarens. You see, McLaren are a very interesting brand. Although we now really consider them very much part of the supercar establishment, they've only really been at it for, well, about 10 years or so. Not even that, really. Okay, let's ignore the F1 and things like that. And it's been very, very interesting to watch their progress. Now, I say that as an outsider, and before I get onto the meat of today's topic, I do want to preface this by saying that I have driven two McLarens. I've driven a 650 Spider, not the one in the thumbnail, although I am constantly badgering that car's owner to let me put it on the channel next year. And I've also driven a very, very nice 570 Spider. Both of them were excellent cars. I really genuinely mean that. They were absolutely sublime. And I really do hope to be able to give you a full verdict about one of them at some point next year. It's just not going to happen over the next few months with this weather. However, when you talk to people, now they may be people that actually have the means to buy one of these supercars, or maybe they're just people that watch from the sidelines. There's a few things that really keep coming up as common themes with McLaren, and I thought it would be good to discuss those, perhaps as a sort of bit of constructive criticism. Not that McLaren, of course, need to take any lessons from me, because on the face of it, they seem to be doing fairly well, but I think as the company grows and, more importantly, matures, there's a few things that are gonna be pretty serious issues for them. Now, to begin with, let's talk about depreciation. Now, this really is a two-sided coin, because I've spoke recently in my Porsche GT3 video, very popular video, if you haven't watched it, go and have a look, about the fact that people seem to expect to be able to buy cars now and pretty much not lose any money on them. People want to buy Porsche GT products, people want to buy Ferraris and things. They think they can have them on the finance, and at the end of it, the car's worth basically the same as what they paid for it. Well, this never used to be the case with supercars. It used to be pretty normal that you'd lose a huge chunk of money on these cars, and the thing is that the market's changed quite a bit. You've got speculators coming in and playing with it. Classic car values have gone crazy, and interest rates are very, very low, which means that the people that traditionally could never afford these cars are now starting to buy them. I was browsing eBay last night as a point of curiosity, and I saw a McLaren 12C Coupe up for sale for just under £80,000. Now, I first thought that's gonna be a left-hand drive car with a dodgy history or something like that. Nope, right-hand drive, UK car, no indication of any previous damage or dubious history. In fact, quite the opposite. It seemed to have a good history. It just had 43,000 miles on it. That was it. So you're talking about a £200,000, 200 mile an hour, 600 horsepower supercar for the price of a base 911. That's serious, serious temptation right there. Now, how have these cars gotten so cheap in a relatively short space of time? If you look at a Ferrari 458 of the period, you're going to be paying considerably more for them. And this is the case across basically all markets. McLaren is the UK's home market. I couldn't tell you whether it's their largest market, but if it isn't, it's probably number 2 on the list. The only one I can think that will perhaps compete with us for that would be the United States. And over in the USA, I think McLaren prices have an even harder time than they do here. Why is this? Okay, well, there's a few people that have been very, very vocal about the fact that McLarens are not reliable. Whether this is actually true or not is irrelevant. I don't intend to discuss that because the perception of reliability is far more important than the reliability itself when you're talking about used car prices. Look at the value of something like an old V10 BMW M5, M6. Those cars are still pennies because they have a reputation as being cars that like to break, cost a fortune to fix when they do, and are generally very, very expensive ownership propositions. Well, McLaren has the same sort of thing. There's a few people out there that have been very vocal, very prominent on YouTube and so on, that have said, oh, these cars are going to break. When they do, it's going to cost you a fortune. And I mean like 30, 40,000 pound kind of problems. That's the sort of thing that would very easily put someone off. I mean, I'll admit, when I bought my Lotus, what I really, really wanted was a Ferrari or a Lamborghini. But I was looking at Gallardos, and the early Gallardo, the kind of thing that I could have afforded, well, they're not perfect, and the issues that they're known for are not cheap to fix. And I just wouldn't have had the money to fix that. So that put me off. And with McLarens, it seems to be very much the same thing. However, these McLarens, they're not particularly old cars. You can get a factory warranty. So you think, oh, well, no problem. Just get the factory warranty. Then if it does break, it's sorted. And by all accounts, the people that I know that own these cars that have got factory warranties on them, when something does go, they're very, very quick to replace it. Very professional, very, very efficient. And that's great. That's wonderful, especially when it's things like the gearbox that can break. You want that to be sorted in a very, very quick and easy fashion, and you do not want to be footing the bill for a McLaren gearbox. But the warranty on a 12C is a fortune. I've heard many different figures bandied about, and I'm not a McLaren expert, so if I happen to be getting things drastically wrong here, I have absolutely no doubt that the comment section, the nice understanding people that they are, will come to the rescue and correct me. But I've been told figures of around about £5,000 a year for a warranty on these things, and the low end figures that I've heard are about £3,500. And here's the thing, these are numbers I've been told by McLaren dealers. This brings me on to my second point. McLaren like to replace their cars at fairly regular intervals. They're bringing out a lot of new models. They want to bring out 18 new cars in the next few years. That's a lot. I'm going to get onto that in a minute, but let's stay where we were. The last time I went to a McLaren dealer, which was earlier this year, there wasn't a single 650 there. There wasn't a 12C there either. These aren't old cars. You go to a Ferrari dealership, I mean, they're going to have, Dinos, they might have 599s, they'll have all sorts of stuff, they'll have FFs, they'll have 430s, 458s. They carry quite a large amount of the range. I mean, some of this stuff is quite new. Ferrari dealers a few years ago were not interested at all in taking stuff, say, like 360s, and then they became worth loads of money, and hey presto, main Ferrari dealers are suddenly interested in classics again. Who'd have thought? But the point is that even before this happened, a 10-year-old car or thereabouts would have been something that they would have been interested in retailing. A 430 would be something that a Ferrari main dealer would sell for you. McLaren, though, they just not interested. They just don't seem to care. It's like, no, it's yesterday's news, it's old hat. You don't want one of those anyway. The new one's much better, much cheaper, much easier, much quicker. You go to a McLaren dealer and you try and say to them, oh, I've seen a 650S here, and it's basically the same price as a 570 you've got, and they will do everything in their power to persuade you out of buying a 650 and into a newer car. Now, maybe they do have your best interests at heart, I don't know, but the point is that when you've got dealers talking the cars down, that's really not a good thing. When you've got dealers telling you, by the way, you need to buy this warranty, and it is really expensive, but it's still worth it because the car is going to break, I'm not sure that's the kind of message that I want to hear from a dealer. Now, this of course could be very, very easily fixed. What I think McLaren need to do is to come up with a warranty or warranty and service package of some sort for their older cars, their older Super Series cars in particular, that's just that much more affordable. The people buying cars at 80, 90, 100,000 pounds aren't going to want to spend 40 grand on repairs, and they're not going to want to spend 5 grand on a warranty just in case they have to spend the 40 grand either. So it doesn't help either that when the 12C in particular first came out, there was a lot of issues with the early press cars and so on and so forth. And believe me, although these issues may have been fixed long, long ago, these things will stay around to haunt you. In the Lotus world, the Evora, the early Evoras, had some clutch issues. And basically, there were some problems, the factory fixed it, something wasn't fitted correctly, factory paid for it, factory sorted it, but a few people in America had taken their Lotus to Ferrari or Lamborghini specialists who did not know these cars, did not know what they're doing, were charging silly labour rates, and hey presto, you got a $10,000 bill to change a clutch. And although that's not true, and it shouldn't cost that much at all, I mean, it's still expensive, but nowhere near that much, every time someone in the States is looking at buying Evora, you'll get the question, oh, but I heard it's $10,000 to change a clutch on one of these. These things hang around, so manufacturers need to be proactive in sorting them. Next issue. For the people that are buying new cars, there's another issue to deal with, which is that inconsistent releasing schedule. Now, Ferrari are very, very predictable with their lineup. You know when the car's going to come out, you know when it's going to be replaced, you know when the Speziale or the Pista version is going to come out, you know what it's going to be like. Porsche are very much the same. You know when 911 is going to come out, you know when Turbo is going to come out, you know when GT3 is going to come out. It's all very, very predictable. So people buying the cars have got confidence that like, oh yeah, okay, I know, I'm going to have this car and for the next 2 years, it's going to be the latest and greatest. Not so with McLaren. Their releasing schedule is so vicious and so unpredictable that you never really know what's going to be coming next, or more importantly, when. I was listening to the Seen Through Glass podcast, which actually is very, very informative and told me a lot of things that I didn't know. And one of the reasons that Mr. JWW cancelled his 720 order was because they were only doing the original batch of 720s. Bear in mind that he's a very, very vocal and prominent and well-known supporter of McLaren cars. He wanted his car in a particular spec, which I think with a car of that standard is perfectly acceptable. That's what they should be going for. That's the kind of market you want to go for. And he couldn't have it. All the first cars that came out were made to one of a few basically pre-selected configurations. He didn't want that. So he had to wait a few months. Then he was told he'd have to wait a few months more. And then he realised that actually he probably wouldn't be getting his car until 12 months after release if he was lucky. And the way that McLaren released their cars, he sort of said, well, hang on a minute, this car's probably going to be replaced really, really soon. You know that when 720 Spider comes out, which as of recording hasn't even been announced, it has been an unusually long time, that everyone's going to want to get the 720 Spider. This is always what happens. 80% of sales of these types of cars are the convertible drop-top version. So he just said, no, I don't want it. And if you talk to anybody that's got a 720, they do seem to be experiencing build quality issues again. They had it with the 12C. The 650S was a great leap forward. Many, many improvements across the board. People seem to be much, much happier with the 650 as a car. McLaren really did learn. Unfortunately, with the 720S, by all accounts, they seem to have taken a step back. Have I owned one of these cars? No. Have I driven one of these cars? No. Do I know too many people that have got experience of them? No, but I've spoken to enough people that have all said the same thing, that they have all had issues. The 650 owners that I know don't seem to have. Of course, all car manufacturers can have issues, but when you're talking about cars that are costing £250,000, you don't want to have to deal with any of these kind of things. Bearing in mind too that there aren't very many McLaren dealers in the country, so getting your car looked at and serviced may not be super convenient for a lot of people. Next up, that lovely 650S Spider in the thumbnail Well, I know the owner of that very, very well. We've been friends for a very long time. And he gave me the magazine that you get as a McLaren owner, you know, as a superior human being. You get the same sort of thing if you buy a Ferrari, if you have a Porsche or whatnot, and it's full of lovely things that you and your fancy McLaren can do together. Now, I was looking through that magazine. He gave it to me because he doesn't tend to read these sorts of things, and there was a few trips and things in there that I thought sounded really, really good. He and I have been talking about doing a road trip together for a long time, and we said about maybe taking the McLaren on a trip because he really wants to use the car a bit more than some of his previous supercars. Well, they were planning a lovely trip across the Algarve. It was about a week or so, staying in nice hotels with a bunch of McLaren owners, run by McLaren itself, of course. Get your car valeted every night, and at the end they laid on a track day for you. Lovely, wonderful. Sounded fantastic. We agreed it'd be the sort of thing we'd love to do, and I said, well, look, if I can afford to, I'll go in with you a bit on it, and we'll try and do this as a bit of fun. So I went on the website to see how much it was. £17,000. If you're in America, at this point in time, the pound dollar's not doing too good, but that's over $20,000. That's huge. McLaren are putting on a do at the minute for Christmas for their customers and so on that want to go there. If you want the basic package, you get an evening at the McLaren Technology Centre, you get drinks, canapes, nibbles, all that kind of stuff. You want to go? £1,000 a person for the cheapest package. That's a huge amount of money. Now, you might be sat there thinking, yeah, but if you've got £250,000 to dump on a car, of course you've got that kind of disposable income. No, you don't. Just imagine that you've bought a 540c. McLaren were doing a deal where you could have a 540c and the payments were about £1,000 a month. Now, that was with a really, really unusually big deposit. But the point is that most people, even at the high end, will actually be buying these cars on finance. They're not the sort of people that necessarily have 20 grand to spend on a weekend, a couple of grand to spend on a night out. And there aren't really things that are available for people to do it at the lower end. There's not so much entry-level stuff, and McLaren do need to look after those kinds of people, because as you get people that might be coming into the brand, buying the cars when they're 5-6 years old at, 90 or 100 grand or so, and there are 650s out there, by the way. We talk about the depreciation. There's 650s out there that are a couple of years old, that are about 100 grand off their original price. That's a terrifying amount of depreciation. And it gets worse, because when people see cars losing that much money, they're really, really not going to be keen to buy one, because they're always going to be panicked about how much further they've got to fall. I've known a few finance companies that are even very wary about financing McLarens because they're really uncertain as to what the prices of them are actually going to do. Ferraris and things, no problem, known quantity, but McLarens, they're just not sure. And when you get people that don't know the models, don't know the cars too well, it doesn't help, because they look at, say, something like a 570 and a 12C, and they think that they're the same thing, and they don't always understand how cars work. This is just the nature of the beast. Unfortunately, the people that we deal with can't always be as passionate about cars as we are. And if you think 17 grand for a week away is bad, on the back of this magazine, they were advertising a watch. So this guy said to me, he said, that is a cool watch. He's not the sort of person that buys watches, he's not TGE or anything. He likes these sort of things, and if he wants one that's nice, he'll kind of go and buy it. Lovely looking thing, McLaren Special Edition, looks gorgeous. The watch cost more than his car did. It's a $170,000 watch. Just obscene, absolutely obscene amount of money. McLaren are always pushing the MSO stuff. They want you to spend this, they want you to spend that. And when you see some of the bills for what people have spent on some of these cars, I do start to worry that McLaren really, really don't care about low-end customers. And the cars that they've been releasing lately would kind of seem to prove that theory, because, okay, you've got the 600 LT, which is a confusing car. Looks gorgeous. I'm sure it's absolutely blindingly brilliant, because at the end of the day, and this is important to reiterate, most McLarens are, or certainly my experience, okay, only 2 cars, but they got a 100% success rate with me so far. But they said that it's going to be limited production, but I haven't actually heard that it's sold out yet. Is it? Is it not? I spoke to a dealer and there was a vague response. Let's say that the car is in theory sold out, but I suspect if you lent on your dealer hard enough, you could probably get one of them. And I do worry, because that's probably going to be a brilliant car, and McLaren probably shouldn't be limiting supply of it. But I'm going to be an instant hypocrite and say that one of their big issues is the fact that they are probably making too many cars. And there's 2 sides to that. First off, they're just making them in too great a volume. Ferrari make about 8,000 or 9,000 cars a year in total, and they do pretty well out of that. And the thing with Ferrari is that, special models aside, generally speaking, if you want one, you can have one. Things have got a little bit crazier recently, but I suspect it will go back to normal. But if you want, let's say, a 488 Spider or whatever, you can have one. You may have to wait a couple of years for it. You may have to wait 3 years for it, and it's going to be expensive, but you will get one. McLaren, however, are making so many cars that when I have gone to McLaren dealers on behalf of people that I know that are considering one of these cars, because I'm the sort of selfless type that will test drive a 600 horsepower supercar on behalf of somebody else. I'm nice like that. If anybody out there watching the channel is really thinking very hard about a Pagani or a Lamborghini, then let me know, and I will sacrifice my time for you. I'm that sort of person. But when I've gone to dealers and looked at usually couple-year-old cars, that sort of thing, they've been desperate to try and talk me into getting the person to buy a brand new one. And they've been able to supply that car, usually at a pretty hefty discount, very, very quickly. So the 650S in the thumbnail, that we looked at, now 650S production was coming to an end at the time, but they said they could get us a brand new car made to order with a heavy discount in about 3 months. Ferrari at the time were quoting about 4 years for a 488 Spider. This is one reason, this is another reason that those used prices fall quite so violently and rapidly. It's an issue. The other issue, and this is something that I've been saying about McLaren for quite a long time, is the fact that they have quite a few cars, and they are intent on introducing a lot more, that thus far all basically are the same thing. You have the 570, the 540C apparently is discontinued. Now the 570, which is a 2-seater, carbon-tubbed, twin-turbo V8 supercar, available in coupe or Spider form. Then you have the 720, which is a carbon-tubbed, 2-seater, mid-engine, twin-turbo V8 supercar with a slightly bigger engine that's quite a bit faster, granted, and fancier suspension and all that, but the ingredients are very, very similar. You had the P1, which was a carbon fiber tubbed V8 twin turbo car with a hybrid system that was very, very fast and very expensive and very, very sexy looking, but kind of on the face of it, same sort of thing. 675 LT, same sort of thing. And the Senna, I personally don't understand it. I mean, the Senna is just it's a toy for the ultra rich, and you know that very few of them are probably actually going to go near racetracks, which is tragic. I'm sure a number of them will be used by those select few die-hard people, the sort of people that get on Ferrari's FXX program, that sort of thing. But you know, and then the next thing they announced is the Speedtail, which, I mean, I just look at it and I go, why? If I was in the market for that sort of car, I'd probably just get a Bugatti or a Pagani or something. I think it's horrendously ugly. It's very un-McLaren in that they said that their goal, their aim was this top speed thing. They want the fastest car ever, and it really isn't. I mean, it's, 9 mile an hour, 7 mile an hour, something like that faster than the McLaren F1 was 25 years ago, that had basically half the power. So I don't quite understand how they can get only, and I appreciate that when you're talking about 240 mile an hour, another 10 mile an hour is a big thing, but it just, and I'm sure round a track and it probably whip the pants off an F1, but it just, I don't know, just horrible to me. I mean, it's just not the sort of car that, I can see on a bedroom wall poster at all. It's, what do kids have nowadays, I suppose, mobile phone background. It just no. just not into it at all. Very, very odd car. And that's another thing as well, I guess, that looks and sound are super, super important for the buyers of these kinds of cars. And McLaren, getting a good exhaust noise seems to be just something McLaren can never quite get. It's escaped them. They've had cars that sound, not bad, not all right, and some of them do sound a lot better in person than they do on YouTube. The only one that I've heard a clip of and gone, oh yeah, that sounds tasty, was the 540 that Sam from See Through Glass had. And he had a Larini pipe on that and a decat and everything, and that did sound awesome. But I've never, the 570S that I drove was a Spider with an MSO exhaust. So you've got the regular exhaust, you've got the sports exhaust, which is already like $400,000, and then the MSO exhaust that we were told was about £7,000, a titanium or Inconel or one of these things, basically unicorn horn exhaust. And I mean, it sounded all right, but I shouldn't be saying that about a £7,000 exhaust, should I? It was like, I know that McLaren have an awful lot of things to deal with and to try and get the car sounding decent. There's a lot of rules and regulations to tiptoe around, but they're the same rules and regs that Mercedes have to tiptoe around, and AMG do a fantastic job of making their car sound great. And it's the same rules that Ferrari have and Porsche have, and they've all been doing absolutely fine so far. So I really don't know quite what it is about McLaren that's just been such a struggle for them to get the cars sounding right. And in terms of getting them to look right, there's no familial resemblance at all. Every time McLaren bring out a new car, it's like they've fired their entire design team and started again. You look at a Ferrari, okay? Ferrari are the gold standard in the supercar segment. Let's take 355. You can trace that car's looks all the way back to the 308. It's a beautiful car, it's evolved, each one does look different, but you can see the lineage, you can see the heritage there. McLaren, I actually think the 12C is one of the best looking cars they've ever made. It's aged really, really well. It's a very cohesive design, and with a good colour on it, like a volcano orange, something like that, it looks stunning. A 650S is actually not too bad, even though it is very much a P1 front bolted onto the 12C. The P1 was beautiful. Then they bring out the 570, the Sports Series, and a totally different design language, just completely different school of thought. And there's bits about it I like, there's bits about it I don't. There hasn't ever really been a McLaren that I look at and go, oh my God, I have to have that. And then the 720, different design school again. And then the Senna, a totally different thing. Granted, I appreciate the fact that the Senna's looks are very much functional, but it's just a totally different way of looking at things. A Speedtail, again, totally different school of thought. And yes, okay, again, the Speedtail, another car where the body is functional, and that's cool, and I praise McLaren for doing that and styling it to be functional first. But there's still lots of ways that you can incorporate design cues and things into a car to make it a part of a family. And that's the thing that McLaren don't really have. I mean, they say that they have a family of cars, but to me, they nearly have a family of the cars in the same way that Porsche have a family of 911s. The difference being that Porsche are not trying to fool anyone into thinking that a 911 GT2 RS is not a 911. Yes, it's a 911 with bells on. I mean, huge, massive, big swinging bells, but it's still a 911 with knobs on. And with McLaren, I kind of get the feeling that actually they're sort of all very much like that. They're all kind of more or less the same-ish. And that's a shame. We look at Ferrari, okay? You've got the 488, you've got the mid-engine V8 sports car. Then you've got what was formerly the F12, is now the 812. You've got the front engine, super sports, super GT, I guess you could call it, kind of thing. Then you've got, what is it now, the GTC4 Lusso in a couple of flavours for the sort of more practical Ferrari. And is there something else in the range? Right, there's the Cali, isn't there? Or now the Portofino. So then you've got the sort of more entry-level, kind of daily usable kind of thing, but there's a two-seater that's a convertible drop top that's basically a rival for like a super high-end Mercedes, that type of thing. And it's just all a bit confusing really at McLaren, because, you know, Ferrari, you could buy 4 of their cars and each one would have a different purpose, a different need, and it would make an awful lot of sense. Whereas with McLaren, they're all very much the same thing. And seeing as the first car they ever came out with, the 12C, was more than fast enough for anything you could possibly need, I could see people buying that and then going, well, I don't need to buy any more McLarens. I'm done. And especially when McLaren seems so happy to sort of just drop you, as it were. They got no interest in keeping your custom, from what I've seen. I just, you got to remember as well, McLaren don't have this specialist network that have built up that Ferrari have, because they've been around for so long. If you've got a Ferrari, okay, yes, you could take your 348 to a Ferrari main dealer if you wanted to, and you could get absolutely rinsed by them. But you don't have to. There's loads of independent specialists. I highly recommend Grimaldi Engineering, for example. There's loads of others, DK, all that sort of thing. But you've got the choice. McLaren, not yet. It's not really something McLaren can do a lot about. They can't just create an independent network. But I have this sneaky suspicion that McLaren don't want an independent network of people, because that would mean that their precious cars don't get serviced in the exact way that they want them to. And servicing that 650 Spider, by the way, which has to be done. If you miss one service, McLaren will not touch your car. They will not take it in Part X at all. £1,500 is the quoted price for an oil change on a 650S. Now, the quality service was excellent. McLaren Hatfield performed that service, and we did get a little bit of discount on them. If you speak to them, I'm sure they'll do the same for you. And they were excellent. No complaints. But that's a lot of money. It's a hell of a lot of money. And that's it, I suppose. There's a few somewhat disconnected, somewhat connected thoughts about the state of McLaren. I really, really want them to succeed, because I don't want them to go away. I don't want anything to happen to them. I don't think it will. There's too much money behind them now for anything to really fail. But I don't think they're doing as good a job as they could be. And I think really their focus is too much on the guys that have huge amounts of money. They need to focus on the people that have got quite a bit of money. There's a great opportunity there, because there's a lot of people right now getting really, really disillusioned with Porsche and all their antics with GT products and all that kind of stuff. So you've got a load of people there with the right amount of money, 100, 150 grand, they're there. Grab them, but look after them. There we go. Are you a McLaren owner? If so, I would absolutely love to hear from you about your experiences. Have you seen the things that I have? Do you completely disagree? I mean, I could be wrong. As I've said, I'm not a McLaren owner. I haven't been. I've just been around quite a few of them, and these are the things that I've picked up. And even if every single thing that I've said is actually untrue, it's still important, because, going back to what I said at the start, perception is more important than reality, because you get a lot of people that will just hear things and never actually go and try and find out whether they're true or not. So, thank you all for watching, especially if you've stayed to the bitter end. I hope it's been somewhat interesting and educational, informative, entertaining, any of these things for you guys. I'm off now to go and speak to an exhaust specialist about getting something nice and tasty put on my 911. At least this sounds quite good. Thanks for watching, guys. Really appreciate it. Please hit the like button if you haven't already. Please do subscribe if you don't already. And we'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.